Odd, the year was 1978, a time when the world was still wild in places, untouched by satellites or the eyes of modern civilization. Odd, the Amazon rainforest stretched endlessly like a black ocean of green, a place older than memory, older than history itself. Even in those days, few dared to enter its heart, for those who did often did not return. But 5 travelers, bound by curiosity, ambition, and obsession, ignored the warnings and set foot into the jungle. What they sought was knowledge, perhaps treasure, or perhaps something deeper. But what they found was not what they expected. Their journey became a story of terror, a reminder that some mysteries are meant to remain buried. Character introductions. The first was Professor William Carter, a British archaeologist in his late 50s. Grey hair, sharp spectacles, and a stubborn pride carved into his face. He had spent a lifetime studying myths of vanished civilizations, and now he believed he had the proof he needed. He carried with him a leather journal filled with sketches of strange symbols that matched whispers of a forgotten Amazonian tribe said to have disappeared centuries ago. Professor Carter often muttered to himself, "Legends are just truths waiting for proof, and I will be the one to find it." Beside him was his daughter, Isabella Carter, just 24 years old, young, brave, and curious, though far less hardened than her father. She followed him not for fame or glory, but out of love. Her mother had died years before, and the professor's obsession had nearly consumed him. She hoped that by joining him, she might keep him safe, or perhaps bring him back to sanity. She carried a small diary, leather-bound, where she recorded her thoughts with neat handwriting. Then there was Maria Alvarez, a Brazilian botanist in her early 30s. Calm, intelligent, and deeply tied to the natural world, she had studied the Amazon for years, cataloguing its plants and their poisons. Unlike the others, Maria respected the jungle, even feared it. She warned them of its dangers constantly. The forest gives life, but it also takes it. Out here, everything is predator and prey. We must tread carefully. Daniel Miller, the photographer, was only 28. An American with restless ambition, Daniel longed for recognition. He was hired to document the journey, his camera hanging constantly from his neck. But secretly, he hoped this expedition would make him famous. His reels, however, would capture far more than he imagined. And finally, Thomas Green, their guide, a rugged explorer in his 40s, once a soldier. His face was weathered, his voice sharp, and his machete never far from his grip. He had survived wars, storms, and deserts, but he had never faced the Amazon's hidden truths. Still, he was confident. "Stay close, follow my lead, and we'll get through this," he often said. Together they were 5 souls bound by fate, venturing into a place that had already chosen them. Arrival in the Amazon, their canoes glided across the dark waters of the Rio Negro, paddles dipping silently as they moved deeper into the endless green. The air was suffocatingly humid, heavy with the buzzing of insects and the cries of unseen birds. Above them, the canopy formed a living ceiling, blocking out the sun so thoroughly that the world seemed trapped in twilight. Daniel lifted his camera often, snapping photographs of parrots bursting into flight, of monkeys swinging across branches. But through his lens, the jungle seemed distorted, shadows stretched too long, shapes twisted into things that weren't there. He laughed it off at first, but unease lingered in his stomach. Maria whispered warnings as she identified poisonous plants along the riverbank. "That one can kill a man in an hour. That one blinds you if you touch its sap." The others barely listened. Professor Carter was obsessed, flipping through his journal, comparing the trees and rivers to old maps, muttering, yes, we are close, closer than anyone has ever been." Isabella, however, wrote in her diary, "The forest feels alive, not just alive like any forest, but aware, watching." Thomas sat silently at the front of the canoe, eyes scanning the tree line, his grip tightening around his machete. He knew enough about nature to feel when something wasn't right. The jungle's silence on the second day. They reached a narrow trail that forced them to abandon the canoes and march on foot. The ground was damp, sucking at their boots, while vines hung like nooses from the branches above. Strange insects crawled across their clothes. Every step seemed too loud, as though the forest didn't want them there. And then, silence. The birds stopped singing, the insects stopped buzzing, even the wind seemed to vanish. Only the crunch of their boots echoed in the stillness. Thomas muttered, "I don't like this. Animals don't go quiet unless there's something to fear." Professor Carter scoffed, adjusting his glasses. "Nonsense. The Amazon is full of mysteries. Perhaps it's just the wind." But Isabella shivered. The silence felt deliberate, unnatural, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. First strange signs. It was Maria who noticed the carvings first. Odd. On the trunk of a massive ceiba tree, twisting symbols spiraled across the bark. Circles within circles, jagged lines that looked almost like screaming faces. Odd. The cuts were sharp and fresh, far too new to be relics. Carter rushed forward, eyes gleaming.
Yes! These match the sketches! I knew it!
Odd. This is proof. The lost tribe left their mark here. Thomas shook his head, frowning. No one lives this deep anymore, and if they do, they don't want us here. Odd. Later that evening, Daniel found something half buried in the mud near the riverbank. At first, he thought it was driftwood, but when he pulled it free, it was a human skull, the jaw shattered, the teeth sharpened into points. Red paint streaked across the bone. Maria paled. This isn't a burial, it's a warning. That night, as they tried to rest, the jungle came alive again, but not with natural sounds. Low, guttural chants drifted through the trees, too faint to understand. Odd, yet too deliberate to dismiss. Isabella wrote in her diary with trembling hands, "It feels like they're surrounding us." Odd. Whoever they are, they know we're here. The vanishing of Thomas. By the third morning, unease had set in like a fever. The group was wary, mosquito, bitten, odd and irritable, but it was Thomas, their guide, who remained most alert. He rose early to gather wood for the fire, muttering about keeping the flames high. Odd. He walked into the trees with his machete, promising to return shortly, but hours passed. When the sun was already high, odd. Isabella noticed the firewood pile remained small. "Where's Thomas?" she asked nervously, scanning the shadows. Maria frowned. Odd. He should have been back by now. They searched the nearby trails, calling his name. Only the echoes of their own voices answered back. Odd. Then Daniel spotted it, a machete lying in the mud, its blade wet with something strange. It wasn't blood, it was black, thick, tar-like. Odd. And when it caught the light of the lantern, it shimmered unnaturally as though it was alive. Maria stepped back, covering her mouth. Odd. That isn't natural. Carter bent to examine it, fascinated. Remarkable, perhaps tree sap. But before he could finish, Isabella whispered sharply, "Odd. Listen." They froze. From deep within the forest came a sound, soft at first, then clearer. A laugh. But it wasn't a human laugh. It was too thin, too sharp, odd, too hollow. Daniel lowered his camera slowly. That's not Thomas. The laugh vanished into silence, and no matter how far they searched, Thomas Green was never seen again. Daniel's photographs that night, the group huddled around the fire, their nerves raw. Daniel set up his camera on a tripod, odd, muttering that he would at least capture proof of what was happening. He clicked photos in bursts of the fire, of the tree line, of the shifting darkness beyond. Odd. When he developed the film hours later inside his tent, his hands began to shake. The photographs showed what the naked eye had missed. In one frame, odd, behind them at the edge of the firelight stood a tall, twisted figure, its body wrapped in vines, its hollow eyes glowing faintly. Daniel stumbled out of his tent, odd, clutching the photograph.
"Look at this! It's right there! It was standing behind us!"
Isabella gasped when she saw the print. Odd. That thing, it was watching us. Professor Carter took the photograph, staring at it with wide eyes. The Guardians, the legends, spoke of them. Odd. I thought they were metaphors. But they're real. They've been here all along. Maria glared at him. "You knew about this? You brought us here knowing this?" Odd. Carter didn't answer, only muttered to himself as if possessed. Proof. Undeniable proof. The whispers as the night dragged on. Rest became impossible. Odd. One by one, the group heard voices in the trees. At first faint, then louder. They were whispers, broken words in a language none of them recognized. Odd. But the tone was unmistakable, calling. Maria clutched her head, shaking. "They're saying my name." "I hear them! I hear them!" Odd. Isabella pressed her hands over her ears, her eyes wide with terror. "No, it's not real. It's not real," Daniel panicked. Odd. Snapped photos blindly into the darkness, the flash tearing through the trees, illuminating nothing but vines and shadows. Yet when the film developed, odd, faint shapes appeared in the background, faces twisted and elongated, staring directly at the lens. Carter, though frightened, could not hide his excitement. Odd. This is it. This is the tribe preserved by the forest. Not gone, not dead, something else. Maria snapped at him. "You fool!" Odd. "They're not preserved. They're hunting us!" The whispers grew louder, now distinct, now clear. They weren't just calling random names anymore. Odd, they were calling theirs. One by one, each member of the group heard their own name drifting from the trees. Isabella froze, her face pale. Odd. That was my mother's voice, as she's been dead for years. Daniel shook his head violently. No, they're in our heads. Odd, there. And then the chanting began. Low, rhythmic, steady. drums in the distance, beating like a heartbeat. The jungle seemed to sway with it, the trees groaning, odd, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The second lost Daniel couldn't take it anymore. His nerves snapped like dry twigs. He grabbed his camera. Odd, his face twisted with anger and fear.
I'll prove it's nothing. Just tricks. I'll prove it. Daniel, stop.
Maria shouted, Odd, but he was already running into the trees, the beam of his lantern swinging wildly. Moments later, a scream shattered the night. They raced after him, Odd, stumbling through the undergrowth until they found him hanging upside down from a tree. Thick vines had wrapped around his legs, Odd, pulling him into the air like prey caught in a trap. His camera dangled from his neck, the lens cracked, the flash flickering faintly. Daniel's mouth hung open, Odd, filled with soil, his eyes wide in frozen terror.
Maria shrieked, he's dead! The forest! Oh God, the forest took him!
As they watched, Odd, the vines seemed to tighten, pulling his body higher into the canopy. And then he was gone, swallowed by the jungle. Isabella fell to her knees, sobbing. Odd. Carter stared silently, clutching his journal, whispering, it's all true, all of it. And the jungle whispered back, the temple appears by the 5th day. Odd. Exhaustion clung to the survivors like a sickness. Only Carter, feverish with excitement, seemed energized. The jungle grew denser, the air heavier. Odd, and then at last, through curtains of vines and twisted roots, they saw it. The ruins. An ancient temple half swallowed by the forest. Odd. Its stones cracked and weathered, yet still standing with an unnatural defiance. Roots of massive cedar trees wrapped around it like skeletal fingers. Odd. But the carvings on its walls remained visible, spirals, jagged faces, and symbols that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Carter dropped to his knees, overcome. Odd. The temple of Akara, its rear god, it's real. Isabella pulled him back sharply.
Father, look at it!
This place is wrong. Odd. But Carter only smiled. Wrong. No, my dear, this is history, this is eternity. Inside the temple, the interior was worse. Odd, the air was thick with the stench of decay. Bones lay scattered across the floor, some animal, many human, arranged in strange patterns, circles, spirals, offerings. Odd, Maria gagged, covering her mouth. This isn't a ruin, it's a tomb. At the center of the chamber stood a stone altar, Odd, slick with black stains that had never dried, as though the sacrifices of centuries still bled upon it. As Isabella's lantern flickered across the walls, she froze. Odd, the carvings weren't just decorative, they told a story. A tribe kneeling before the forest, giving their bodies, their souls, to the roots. Odd. The last carving showed them rising again, twisted, taller, their faces hollow. Maria traced the stone with trembling fingers. They didn't disappear. Odd. They became part of the forest, and then from the shadows came movement. The guardians revealed, tall figures emerged from the darkness. At first, Odd, they looked human, long limbs, familiar silhouettes, but as they stepped closer, their true forms became visible. Their bodies were fused with bark and vine. Odd, their faces stretched into hollow masks with glowing red eyes. They walked with the slow, deliberate grace of something ancient. One raised a hand, Odd, and the vines around the altar began to writhe. Maria gasped. The tribe, this is what they became. The figure spoke, its voice hollow. Odd, like wind through dead branches. You enter sacred ground, you come seeking, and so you will give. Isabella clutched her father's arm, terrified. Oh, we have to leave now. But Carter did not move, his eyes gleamed with madness, tears streaming down his face. It's true. All of it. The guardians of death. The eternal tribe? I was right. The betrayal, the guardians stepped closer, vines slithering across the floor like snakes. Maria tried to light a torch, swinging it to keep them at bay, but Carter raised his hand to stop her. No. Don't you see? They don't want to harm us. They want us to join them. Isabella stared at him in horror.
Father, listen to yourself! You've lost your mind!
Carter's voice cracked with desperation. Odd. All my life they mocked me, they laughed at my research. But now I will become part of the eternal. Knowledge beyond death,
Isabella!
Don't you understand? Odd, this is the only way. Maria screamed at him. You brought us here for this. You sacrificed Thomas, Daniel, us, all for your obsession. Carter ignored her. Odd. Stepping toward the altar, arms outstretched, as if embracing the guardians. The vines reached for him, curling around his body. Isabella cried out, no. Father.
Odd, please.
But it was too late. Consumed by the forest, the roots pierced through his skin, wrapping around his chest, burrowing into his mouth and eyes. Carter convulsed. Odd, but he did not scream. He laughed. A horrible, gurgling laugh that echoed in the chamber as his body was pulled into the stone, swallowed by the altar itself. Odd. When the vines released, only his journal remained on the floor, stained with black fluid. Isabella fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Maria pulled her back, whispering urgently, "We have to go! Now!" But the Guardians were already closing in. Maria's fate, the two women ran through the twisting corridors of the temple, their lanterns barely cutting through the suffocating dark. Behind them, the sound of vines slithering and footsteps that were not human echoed closer and closer. Maria shoved Isabella forward. "Go! Don't stop!" But as they turned a corner, a vine whipped out, wrapping tightly around Maria's leg. She screamed as she was dragged backward into the darkness. Isabella tried to grab a hand, but Maria shoved her away.
Run, Isabella! Run!
Her screams echoed until they were cut off, swallowed by the jungle's silence. Isabella ran alone. The mirror chamber, she stumbled into a vast chamber, walls lined with tall slabs of polished black stone. At first, she thought they were mirrors, but when she looked into them, her reflection was gone. Instead, she saw faces, thousands of faces pressed against the glass. Men, women, children screaming, begging, watching. Among them, she saw Daniel, she saw Maria. She even saw Thomas, his eyes wide with terror. And deeper still, she saw her father smiling. The faces began to move, pressing harder against the stone, cracking it. The chamber shook as the voices rose into a deafening wail. Isabella fell to the ground, covering her ears, sobbing. "No, no, not from the shadows." A guardian whispered, "You will join them, all must join." The stone cracked further. The faces inside turned toward her, and they smiled.